us. As the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Come down. Spirit, when you move, you make the heart pound. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Come down. Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Spirit was moving over your mind. Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Spirit was moving over your mind. Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Fiery way to come to it again. Open up the gates like heaven on earth. Rest on us. Rest on us. Fiery way to come to it again. Open up the gates like heaven on earth. Rest on us. Rest on us. Come down. Spirit, when you come in your heart. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Calm down. Spirit, when you move, you make my heart down. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Let's be a people who seek the Lord, seek His face. Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You're all we want. You're all we want. Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You're all we want. You're all we want. Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You're all we want. You're all we want. Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You're all we want. And you're all we want. Spirit, when you do it, make my heart pound. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Calm down. Spirit, when you do it, make my heart pound. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and you go down, go down. Spirit, when you do it, make my heart pound. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Calm down. Spirit, when you move, make my heart pound. When you feel the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. You are light, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You bring life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. You great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. One day every tongue and nation and tribe confess that Jesus is Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Lord, as we continue to worship you right now with this new song, Lord, we come before you and recognize that you are a holy God, that no one else can do what you can do. No one else can command the wind and the waves, can come down and bring joy and hope to a people that so need it, God. So we come before you and we lift you up as a holy God. Lord, we sing this to you. Lord, speak to us in a powerful way through it. Sing this new song together. Father God, we thank you for this truth, God, that you are holy and mighty, and you see us and you know us and you understand us. God, we pray that through your word, through Philippians tonight, you give us you more clearly, God. We love you. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Come grab a seat. All right. That is peaceful. I feel like a wheat field is a very peaceful thing. Unless you're a wheat farmer and then you got to like do work, you know. It's probably not a peaceful thing for a wheat farmer. But there you go. All right, guys.
last week we went through Philippians, and we looked specifically at the work that God is doing in us and how we should be confident that God is currently doing that work, that it's a present thing that's ongoing, and also a future hope that He is going to complete that work. And that gives me relief because I don't feel like everything is right with me. And anyone who's honest with themselves should be able to look at themselves and say, there could be more, right? God has something more planned for me. And there's something so powerful and comforting to hear that the Lord looks at us and says, you are worth restoring. You're worth bringing back to what I've created you to be. And I will not rest until that work is done. That should give us joy on a day-to-day basis. But then Paul says more in Philippians 1, I pray that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. Meaning we are to increase our love for the Lord in more and more. It abounds, right? That the work that we do here, to take part in God's work, is to have our love abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. And that's our part in the Lord's work of shaping and molding us into His image. Now, this week as we go on with the letter, Paul's going to continue to speak to his beloved Philippians. Remember, they're all gathered around to hear what Paul has to say after Epaphroditus comes back. And Paul switches from talking about his prayer, right? The beginning of it is his prayer for the Philippians. It's like his opening greeting with just this rich prayer for them. But he moves on from that to speaking a little bit about how he's doing, which makes sense, right? Remember, he's imprisoned in Rome for preaching the gospel. And the whole reason this letter was written is because the Philippian church heard about Paul being in prison. They love Paul. They have a wonderful relationship with Paul. They hear that he's in prison, and they start a GoFundMe, basically, to go help him out. That's what they did. They went around, they did a Kickstarter, a fundraiser, and then when they had the money, they chose one person among themselves. His name is Epaphroditus, to go take the cash over to Paul and bring him the gift from the church so that he would be okay in Rome. And then Paul writes a letter back with Epaphroditus back to the Philippian church, addressing it to them. So obviously, he's going to tell them a little bit about how he's doing, right? I mean, that just makes sense. They went through this whole ordeal to go help him out. He's going to tell them a bit about how he's doing. Here's what he says in Philippians 1:12. Remember, all of the Philippian church, which is not many of them because it's not huge, they're all listening to the pastor, or maybe it was Epaphroditus himself, reading this letter to all of them. And they are on the edge of their seats, listening and hearing what their beloved Paul is doing and how he's doing. Here's what he says in 1:12. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. It's true that some preach Christ out of envy or rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I'm put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached, and because of that I rejoice. So he tells them, and this doesn't feel like it's a lot of big news happening right here, right? It doesn't feel like that. It just feels like Paul's just kind of giving them a little brief overview of how things are going, right? But let's actually really look at this for a second. He's telling them about his imprisonment that has happened because of the gospel. And he says that the gospel has advanced with the whole palace guards. One thing that's true of Paul is that if you want to throw him in prison, that's fine, but just expect that all the prison guards to end up Christians. Like, that's just kind of the way things go down, all right? So if you really want to like shut Paul up, just be prepared to have a lot of Christian inmates after he gets into the jail cell with them. And that's exactly what's happening, right? He says, guys, like the whole palace guard is being affected by the gospel. It's great. And he also said that there are some Christian rivals, some other preachers who don't like Paul or rivals to Paul. And they're preaching the gospel, but they're doing so out of trying to like stick it to Paul. And Paul just kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't really care. As long as the gospel is preached, that's all that really matters. And you may be surprised at this, guys, but I'm going to give you a little bit of business insider, okay? Just a little bit of inside information. Is that not all preachers like view each other as brothers in Christ. Okay? Some of them view each other as rivals. That's not the way it should be. That's totally not the way it should be. But it is not an uncommon thing for pastors to kind of have some territorialness, and this is my turf kind of attitudes with their church and other people's churches. So it kind of goes all the way back to the very beginning, right? That pride kind of gets in the way, and this is totally what's happening with Paul. There are other preachers and other Christians that don't like Paul, and they're trying to outdo Paul in their preaching. They're trying to have a better, bigger following than Paul. And Paul's like, guess what? Joke's on you. I don't really care, because you're preaching the gospel, and that's the whole point, okay? That's the whole point, guys. He just kind of shrugs his shoulders. He's giving the Philippians two potential points of discouragement and pain for himself. That's what's happening here. The first is his imprisonment. He has no freedom. He's in prison. He's literally in chains. Right? Going to prison would upset most people. All right, most people that if you guys ever watched a sentencing before, like in YouTube, it's a very depressing thing. So it's probably not something that you would normally come across. But basically, it kind of runs the gamut of like how people react when they get the guilty verdict. When the judge reads off what the jury says, and they say guilty on this charge, guilty on this charge, and then the camera pans to the defendant, and their reaction goes from absolute shock or horror or smugness, like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care, or anything in between. Sometimes anger, like lashing out. It's not a fun picture, right? Imprisonment is not a good thing for anybody. No one likes that. And Paul's saying, I am imprisoned. But the second is that during his imprisonment, other Christian leaders and preachers rise up to slander him, and they use their ministries to rival him. And this is arguably more painful, because getting persecuted and pushed back from people outside the church is hard, but getting it from brothers and sisters within the church is harder. But how does Paul react to these two hardships? He says in the end, and because of this, I rejoice. I rejoice. His response is rejoicing. And I want you to think about that. When was the last time you rejoiced over something? When was the last time you rejoiced over anything? I don't know, maybe you did well in a sports meet or a game or something that you play. Maybe your team did really well, right? The Lions beat the Packers. That was the last time I rejoiced. There we go. And you heard Ben Johnson's coming back, guys. Our prayers were answered, so I'm super psyched about that. I rejoiced over that. Maybe you crushed a grade, right? Like maybe you just got this grade back and you were really nervous about it. You weren't too sure about it, but then you got the report back and you absolutely crushed it. You did so good, and you're like, yes, rejoicing, right? Or maybe you got exactly what you wanted for Christmas. You're hoping you would get this one thing, and you got it, right? You got the phone, or you got whatever it was that you're really hoping for. That's great. Last time you rejoiced. Last time you're legitimately rejoicing over something. Now I want you to think about pain and hardship. When things went bad in your life. Friendships broken, maybe. I don't know, grades going down. Grades not coming back very well. And you feel that pain of just like, no, I'll never go to college. or what? I don't know if you, like what you've had, when you're experiencing problems and strife, or maybe strife or issues or problems with your parents. And that can be a different kind of pain that just sinks deep in you and lasts for a while. How often do you rejoice during those times? Probably not very often, right? What you see pretty consistently in our lives is that we rejoice and we don't rejoice when certain things line up. We respond to the circumstances in our life that affect either positively or negatively our missions in life. That's what we rejoice or mourn over or grieve over, right? Those are typically what we're doing. We respond to the circumstances in our life that affect, for either good or ill, positively or negatively, our missions in life. What we're going for. What is our mission in life? You rejoice when you get a great grade in class because it positively affects your mission to succeed in school. So you rejoice over that thing positively affecting that mission. Right? You despair when your grades suffer because it's negatively affecting that mission. You despair when friendships or relationships go south because that negatively affects your mission to be popular or well-liked or highly regarded by the people around you. That matters to you, and that is a mission in your life. When things go south in that, you despair over it. When things happen around us, the first thing we typically ask ourselves, without maybe saying it exactly, realizing what we're saying, is how does this affect me in my mission? That's what we're going for. How does this affect me in what I'm going after in my mission in life? This is how we function. And this is a key element where Paul gets his peace that transcends all understanding in Philippians 3 from. We're going to get to that eventually. It's going to take a while, but we're going to get to it. He's setting it up, though, so that we understand it better. Because what Paul asks when these things come to pass in life is, how does this affect God in his mission of which I am a part? That is a fundamentally different question to ask when we're dealing with things in the world. How does this affect God in his mission of which I am a part? Paul looks at his imprisonment and asks, how does this affect God in his mission of the gospel? Well, look, the gospel's being preached here in prison to the point where members of Caesar's guards are accepting Jesus. I rejoice, right? God's mission is succeeding. It's going well. And then he looks at the fact that there's other preachers slandering him and opposing him. And if his mission were to be a highly regarded, successful preacher, and that was it, he would not be happy about that. He would not be happy about those guys succeeding. And yet, he says, look, the gospel's being preached. People are coming to the Lord and seeing salvation and being saved. I rejoice. Why? Because he's asking the question, how does this affect God in his mission, of which I am a part? Having peace that transcends all understanding isn't just about being like tough and emotionless, right? Not caring about anything. That's how some people approach life. They're like, you know what? The only way to really deal with the hardships is just not care. Tough it up, right? I just have to not care about things, and I have to just be really strong and be okay when things go south. I need to expect things to go really bad. So that when they do go bad, they go exactly how I expected them to go, right? Like that's how some people might approach like how to survive like difficult times and difficult situations, right? They don't want to be affected by bad things, so they grit their teeth and they buckle down. And Paul's not like that. In 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about something that doesn't make him rejoice, real legitimate hardship. He says it in 2 Corinthians 12. He says, therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, like prideful or arrogant, he says, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. This isn't Paul saying, look, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Bring it on, Satan. I don't care, okay? I'm strong. I'm amazing. I'm Paul. I'm not small Paul. I'm big Paul, right? Like that's not what he says here. He says the opposite. This is what he says after. He says, but he said to me, he meaning God, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. I know we're getting a little bit away from Philippians by going back to 2 Corinthians. But what we see in Philippians is Paul living out what he says here in Corinthians. Having peace in hardship isn't about like being really tough and really strong and just dealing. It's about being weak. Paul isn't super tough. He's just on a different mission. And unlike our missions, which will often fail, and even when they succeed, they last for a short while, and then the success of that mission fades away, God's mission will succeed, and it doesn't fade. You will be victorious when you're on his mission, and you'll find that the failures and hardships we encounter here on earth, they just pale in comparison to the victory and joy there is in serving Christ in his mission in the gospel. I'm going to do something that's a little bit of a cliche. I'm going to go to a sports analogy here, guys. And I don't do it that often, so I think I have the right to do it every once in a while. You guys ready? Okay. I have a fantasy football team. I have 2 fantasy football teams. They sucked this year. They did really bad. Absolute waste of time. It was brutal. But for those of you who don't know how a fantasy football team works, basically you pick real players out there in the world, and then you put them on this fake team that you own, and then however they play in the real world gives you points for your fake team to go and play other fake teams who picked other real players in the world. You kind of got it? Okay, so if I picked Jared Goff, which I wouldn't, and I wouldn't have drafted him, but like let's say I picked Jared Goff, the quarterback for the Detroit Lions, and then he does really well in a real game, he's going to give me points in my fake game. That's how fantasy football works, okay? This year I had a guy named Jalen Waddle on my team, and he was awesome. He's a wideout for the Dolphins. He did amazing for me this year, guys. He was like one of the stars on my team. I didn't win very often, but when I did win, it was usually like because of him. He played a significant role. 1 week, Jalen Waddle got me 28 points. That's a lot, okay? 28 points is a good week. And I won my fantasy game. I won it. And I was really pissed off about it, guys. I was angry. I was so mad that he did well, and I really wish that he had gotten 0 points. You know why? Because he played the Lions. Guys, he played the Lions. And man, we made him look good, right? He was playing my team. When I watched the Lions play, all my fantasy hopes and dreams go out the windows because I identify myself more with the mission of the Lions than I do with the mission of my personal fantasy football team. Now, that might be a ridiculous statement that many people be like, yeah, you're putting your hopes and dreams in some pretty sad places. I don't know. But I do, okay? Call me silly, but I do. I put my identity more into the mission of my team, my real life team, the Detroit Lions, than I do with my fantasy football team. And it switches whenever there's a conflict of interest. When my fake fantasy team needs the Lions to do poorly, I'm still cheering for the Lions, and I don't care how my fantasy football team goes. Paul makes it clear that we are to identify ourselves with the mission of the gospel, which is a winning battle. It's not like identifying yourself with the mission of the Lions, which will always fail in the end. That's just the truth. God's battle is a winning battle, more than our own personal missions for ourselves. Now, having Christ benefits us greatly, right? It does. You're given freedom. You're given joy. You're given a family of believers. You're given access to the Creator God of the universe. God himself walking alongside you through the Holy Spirit, giving you guidance and wisdom. Of course, a life with Christ benefits us. But the mission of the gospel isn't just for your benefit. It isn't just to save and redeem you. It's way bigger than that. It's to save and redeem the world and make everything right again. It's to bring hope to everyone, eventually ushering in a day when Christ returns and ends sin and suffering once and for all. That is way bigger than you and your problems. That is way bigger than you and your successes here in this world. Philippians 1:18, listen to what Paul says here. And there's going to be a refrigerator magnet verse coming up. Okay, you've heard it. So listen for it. But now that you see the context of it, be ready for it. Philippians 1:18. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Emily and Kaylee, the days surrounding your dad's funeral, I heard this passage get spoken a lot around by a lot of people. I can't remember if it was from you guys too, honestly, but it was just, this was one of those passages that kept recirculating. And I can't think of a better place to go to in a time like that. Because if all we have is our own little missions on earth, right? If your dad's main mission was just like growing coffee, and that was it. He was just a coffee guy, right? And that was all that mattered in life. Then we're destined for a pretty small and sad life that doesn't come to much in the end. And that just wasn't the case. He was on something far greater and far bigger that isn't just outlasting him, that he's that he's going to be a part of for eternity, that we're all called to be a part of for eternity. How incredible is that? How amazing is that? So the question for you guys is, what mission are you on right now? Like, what is your mission in life? Like, what is your goal? What are you going for right now? Think about the times that make you rejoice, make you angry, or despair. What does it tell you about the mission that you are on? Paul isn't saying that we should not have goals or try to not achieve things in life. The answer to despairing over a bad grade is not to stop caring about your grades in future. Okay, that's not the answer to our life. It's not to just take away our missions and take away our goals in the world so it doesn't affect you anymore. The goal is to align your life and your heart on God's mission, the gospel, and then bring all your other personal missions in line with that. All the other ones in our life, all the other goals and missions that we have, bring them underneath the ultimate mission and goal of the gospel. And you're going to see a peace and resiliency that just doesn't make sense. A peace that transcends all understanding. Just think about the kind of peace and the kind of strength and resiliency you would have if you were to align every part of your life with the mission of the gospel, with the mission of God. That's what Paul's describing here. And he's going to continue to describe it. It's only going to get better from here. All right, let's go to life groups on that.
Bye.